Call to order the July 2013 legislative session of the Borough Council. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I invite you all to remain standing. Like a moment of silence for the passing of Jean Nimmons. Mr. Mayor, I believe you have a few words for us to say.
Yes, Jean Nimmons passed away this past weekend. She was a member of Second Baptist Church in Media. She was a long-time Media resident. Her daughter Jennifer played in the softball league in Media growing up. And Jean was also a member of the Women's Army Corps during the Vietnam War. So, like a moment of silence in honor of Jean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, folks at home. Thank you for joining us on this very, very warm evening. Unfortunately, we have some fairly vigorous air conditioning here, so if you wish, come on down, you can join us. We have a couple of ministerial matters we have to take care of. Approval of the meeting minutes for our workshop and our legislative meetings of June 2013. Do I hear a motion to approve the workshop meeting minutes from June 6, 2013?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the minutes?
Try a couple edits, please. On page 4, it states, Councilman Davidson mentioned that this will include prior to the current year. I would amend that to say include taxes due prior to the current year. Second notice is that Councilman Davidson mentioned that the township discussed including a referendum for the November election. What I actually mentioned was that the library had discussed including a referendum, not the township. So I'd like to move that we amend the minutes as I specified.
Is there a motion to amend his motion?
Will do.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the workshop meeting minutes from June 6, 2013, please say aye.
Yes.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. The minutes are approved. Do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes for our legislative session of June 20, 2013?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the council meeting minutes for June 20, 2013, please say aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The minutes are approved. Before we invite members of the public to the microphone, I will announce that at our last meeting, we discussed a matter in executive session concerning personnel and a matter concerning litigation. So that out of the way, is there anyone here present who wishes to come forward and address council at this time? The microphone is right over there. All you need to do is state who you are, where you live, and why you're here. Sir?
Good evening, folks. I'm Robert McMonagall. I live at 529 North Orange Street in Media. And I have a couple of concerns and questions regarding public safety right adjacent to the property that I'm renting there. Well, first of all, this is probably an easy question to answer, but I'm curious why North Orange Street has been closed for the last number of days, just north of the Ridley Creek. And you can basically see the sign there, the closure from our property. And I wanted to ask, secondly, if you might inquire with State Representative Tom Killian regarding, as I understand, North Orange Street is a state highway, and as a matter of public access and public safety, to have a sidewalk put in from 529, the 4 properties there, leading up to Scarborough and Muse. I did drop a line to Representative Killian a couple months back. To the best of my knowledge, I haven't seen an email reply, but it may be lost in the draft box or something somewhere. But so I was wondering what your position would be on having a sidewalk put in there, pushing our baby carriage up the hill in the street, and it's been going on now for a year and a half. And final comment, really, in the form of a question, and I'll sit down and listen to your replies. Just wondering, adjacent to the creek, who owns the property there? Is it the borough that owns the property, or does the borough only own the creek? I mean, there's some question. The reason I ask is it's a matter of safety for my child. My wife and I would like to see a fence put in there so she doesn't go wandering toward the creek. You know, she's a toddler. I'm renting the property. I guess I could do something myself, but Mr. DeRosa was kind enough to come out and take a look at it. He conveyed to me through Mr. Smith, who has been very helpful to me with past inquiries, that the borough only owns the creek and they don't own that property there. Therefore, could not put in just a short fence separating our property from the creek. So, thanks. I'll have a seat and listen to your replies.
I guess you'll take our comments off the air. So as to your first issue, Mr. McMonigle, what's going on in North Orange Street, you anticipated some of my comments tonight. There is the road in North Orange Street is closed north of Centennial. That is as a result of undermining of a culvert in Upper Providence Township. It's not in media, it's Upper Providence Township. There's a culvert there that has failed, and as a result, water has undermined the road. And as it is a PennDOT road, it is PennDOT's responsibility to make repairs. I understand from Mr. Smith that PennDOT is projecting that they could complete the repairs by the end of this week, but it might be into next week before they do so. So that's the situation there. PennDOT is addressing it, and since it is PennDOT's road, it is their responsibility to do so. As to a letter to Tom, Representative Killian, I haven't seen that letter, Mr. Smith, have you?
No, I didn't CC anybody in the room, but personally, I'm waiting for a reply. So would you folks be supportive of putting a sidewalk in there?
I think that we would have to take a look at this, at the issue, the underlying issue, before we send a supportive letter. I think that the appropriate place to bring that forth would be at the Community Design Committee meeting. That is this coming Tuesday here at Borough Hall, the second floor conference room at 4 p.m. So I suggest that you come on Tuesday if you're available and explain what your concern is, and then we as the committee will then make a recommendation to all of council as to whether or not we support writing a letter in support of what you're asking, or whether we do not. As we sit here today, we don't have all the information at hand, so it would be helpful if you can come on Tuesday and let us know what your concern is. Are you available on Tuesday?
I'll have to check and see if possible.
Okay. It's at Borough Hall, second floor conference room, 4 o'clock. Okay. As to, I do not know anything more about the ownership of the area where you'd like to see a fence, other than what you've just told me. Is it on the east side or the west side?
That's the east side.
It's on the east side, okay. Right.
And as a rule, does the borough own any property adjacent to the creek, or is it just the creek?
As a rule, it would be, it sounds like it would be in the right-of-way of the PennDOT's right-of-way. The road itself is owned by PennDOT, and then a certain amount on either side of the roadway is also owned by PennDOT. And if that's the case, then it would be PennDOT that would have jurisdiction to put in some type of a fence or a pathway or something along those lines. We would not have the power to do that because we don't own it. It's not a borough road, it's owned by the state.
Would I go to the recorder of deeds to see exactly how that is?
The state would, as Council President's referenced, they would have the right of way. They would be the ones, you know, who you would have to communicate with regards to that, because it's not even under control of the township and or the borough.
Let me ask Mr. Smith a quick question. Do you think that Jim Jeffrey would have quick access to that information?
I was just going to say, actually, the area that Mr. McGowan was speaking of, I believe, is a little further back from the roadway, and both Jim, Ralph, and I are scheduled to actually go down there tomorrow and take a look at it, and Jim is going to attempt to determine exactly where the borough property is at that time.
So it looks like we'll get some information soon. All right? Thank you. Sure.
So, excuse me, so the fence you were talking about would be parallel to the creek, not along the edge of the road, but behind the apartments there? Or-
Right, the townhomes there, between the townhomes and the land adjacent to the creek, farther from the road.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. McConnell. Does anyone else wish to come before council at this time? All right, hearing no call to approach the microphone, let's then turn to Mr. Johnson, our engineer.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I'll do a short read of my engineer's report. We did some communication with Delaware County Planning Commission for the Act 167 for Crown Creek, which the township's existing stormwater ordinance meets the requirements of for the Crown Creek 167. We're in the process of going through the paperwork for Joseph Zucker in the contract. That should be completed shortly. Attended a few meetings. Also, we assisted the borough in preparing an automated red light enforcement grant. And for subdivision and land development was the Wawa, which occurred this past June and also in July for the Planning Commission. We also had various items to do for Hooten Park, 8th and 11th pipe repair, which we just received some complaints from one resident, which we're in the process of taking care of. That literally occurred yesterday and today. We were in the process of doing the final paperwork to complete the project. We've also been in contact with Garjoul for Philippine Park in closing out that contract. I did meet with Mr. DeRosa and walked through that the other day, and the next day then we met with Garjoul to close that out. That's the items for the month of June. Any other questions?
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Not hearing any, we'll turn to Mr. Scott.
Thank you. I don't have a report tonight.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Scott? We will then turn to the mayor.
Thank you. The police department handled 791 complaints during the month, and I have a summary log for anybody that really would like to go over any of these 791 complaints. There were no reported burglaries during the month of June, and there were a total of 16 traffic details conducted during the month. Side note, July 4th was a great day in media. We had several hundred people at the field playing games. Today, I received an 8-minute video of all the kids running around. We had a couple inquiries. Jeff, you sent me some, and others about, I know the TV cameras filmed me while I was there. Was it on TV or whatever? Well, one of the stations sent me an 8-minute film that I think caught just about everybody there, including 3 takes they took trying to get the kids. There were about 50 gathered in front of the July 4th sign saying, Happy 4th of July. So I think the third, and you get to see all 3 takes. First one, the camera guy said, no, do it again, and they did it again, and it was way too loud, and then it was good. So I'll make that tape available, and again, there are a lot of parents that had kids there that day, and it seems to me that they got every game that was there, that they were playing, and most of the children that were there. So I'll make it available. I just saw it today, so that's why. That's it.
Are there any questions for the mayor? Okay, we are moving at a very quick pace despite the thick weather. Let's move into council committee reports. Mr. Davidson, Finance and Library.
Thank you, President Hall. First item on my agenda is the payment of bills for the month of June. Finance Committee met yesterday, the 17th of July, and recommends the payment of all bills, so I therefore move we pay bills in the amounts as follows. From the general fund, $302,502.06. From the recreation fund, $5,578.97. No funds from the liquid fuels fund, and $130,677.38 from the capital fund, for a grand total of $438,758.41.
All right, it's so moved. The motion has been seconded.
Second?
Very good. Is there any discussion on the motion concerning payment of the June bills?
Any legal fees due to the Third Street project or litigation?
Yes, there are two for a grand total of $1,435.84. One is $1,273.34, and the second is $162.50.
All right, any other discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, I'll call the question. All those in favor of paying the borough's bills for the month of June 2013 from the general, recreation, and capital funds, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Next on my agenda is library report. Effectively, the library is continuing to raise money. They are looking at additional grants, including a RACP grant. And so they had expressed to the borough whether or not they'd say it would help them to have a letter of support from Media Borough saying that we support this project. Obviously, having the local government behind it helps. And so I therefore ask that Media Borough Council authorize our President Brian Hall to sign a letter in support of the library renovation project. And I make that form of the motion.
Second.
Motion's been made and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of authorizing Council President to write a letter of support concerning the Media Upper Providence Free Library and paying a RACP grant, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Just in terms of news and updates from the library, they have recently put out RFPs for a civil and structural engineer for their project. In addition, they are also putting out bids for a design build firm to help put together the project as well. So as I mention every month, I'm a firm supporter of this project. I think it's a great project. It's something we need desperately. And so I would ask any resident who is in support of seeing the library being renovated, they do need funds, to go visit mediauplibrary.org and see if you can contribute some money to their funds. They have raised, a little bit under $1 million so far, but they need to target around $2.5 million of raised funds. So any help you can give them would be appreciated. So that concludes my report.
Any questions for Mr. Davidson? Hearing none, we'll then move on. Before we get to Councilman Rowe, Mr. Mayor, I believe that there's something else you wish to add to your report?
Yes, Brian, I remembered that I did not mention 911. You mentioned to me that I did not remember to mention 911.
It's my turn this month.
Yeah, it is your turn, so I won't mention it. But I'll second what Paul's going to tell you during his report, and that is that anything that you feel that you need police help with, please call 911. But Paul will do it in a much better way than I will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll then turn to Councilwoman Rowe, Recreation and Shade Tree.
Only one item tonight is the appointment is a form of a nomination to the Recreation Board for Kelly Ann Milliner. Her resume has been circulated to council. It was discussed at workshop. We appreciate her willingness to serve and hopefully kind of kickstart that group. So I put that in the form of a motion that she be appointed to the Recreation Board.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
I was not able to attend workshop, but I did review the resume, and I think it's an outstanding resume for someone of that stature to be part of our recreation board.
I think she'll do them a lot of good.
Agreed.
I'll call the question. All those in favor of appointing Kelly Ann Milliner to the Recreation Board for Mr. Smith, what is the term of appointment?
It's an unexpired term, so I'm sorry, I should have noted that on the agenda. So the expiration is 12/31/2016.
Appointment to the Recreation Board for a term that expires December 31, 2016. Please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The motion passes unanimously.
Nothing else tonight.
Any questions for Councilwoman Rowe? Hearing none, we'll move on to Vice President Simpson, Properties, Economic Development, Fair Trade, and Farmers Market.
Thank you very much. Have nothing for legislative action this evening, just a couple of announcements. As for economic development, I mentioned at the workshop that the first in the series of 19 TV spots from the video project with Terry Bradshaw aired 4 days in July earlier this month in the one of the markets that we had selected, which was New York City up to Syracuse into Hartford, Connecticut, also stretched and reached down into New Jersey. And the market viewing there for that area was 6.2 million. So there were 4 different episodes shown at 4 different time slots on 2 different days. So we'll keep you posted. They will be updating us on a monthly basis what the next section will be, which segment, and when it will air. Unfortunately, we don't see that particular area unless you have a vacation house up there or something, but we will try and let people know ahead of time in case they have relatives. You can also see the video on visit mediapa.com's website and on our Borough website. So if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, it's a very, really good representation of the community and includes, of course, not only the Borough as representatives, but the Business Authority, the school district, and also County Council. So I hope you'll all take a few minutes to look at the 5-minute segment. No fair trade announcements for this month. Farmers Market was there this afternoon, and the produce and the offerings are very varied and well worth the trip. I came home with some peach habanero jam, some honey. I got some crab cakes to go, so I didn't have to cook dinner. And of course, lots of great veggies and fruit. Blueberries are really in right now. So I urge you all to go Thursdays from 3 to 7 at the parking lot adjacent to the to the Media Theater. And that would conclude my announcements for this evening.
Are there any questions for Vice President Simpson?
Just a note of concern, they are in this weather being particularly careful about seafood and such things. It seems
No, they
particularly
just wanted to
dangerous to
rot
me.
and everything.
Well, I drove by and
They have.
there was a smell definitely
Well, they
pervading by,
they
so
were
I understand
actually-
the heat, there's
they were-
nothing.
They were actually cooking it there. If you
I'm
want.
just asking to make sure that they're especially vigilant during these hot times that are dangerous for everyone and especially for perishables.
Thank you, Mrs. Rowe. More the health department and health inspector are there. They have.
Are
all
they
of
there
the-
weekly or a
Yes.
couple of times a year?
They're there weekly.
All right, any other questions for Vice President Simpson? Hearing no call for questions, we'll then move on to Community Development, Personnel, and Media Arts Council. That is my portion of the agenda. I have one item for legislative action and a few announcements. The item for legislative action is not one that I think is a happy occasion, but it is an occasion nonetheless. Those of you who've had any dealings with the borough over the past 12 plus years are probably familiar with Corinne Chester. She has been Mr. Smith's administrative assistant for those years, and she has been indispensable to this borough. Ms. Chester has decided after 12 plus years that she's had enough. No, I'm kidding. She has decided that there is a business opportunity that she wishes to pursue, she and her husband, and that is what she wishes to do. So she, with great regret, has informed Mr. Smith that she will be leaving the post at the end of this August. So it is my unhappy job to move to accept her resignation as Mr. Smith's administrative assistant. And I make that in the form of a motion.
Second the motion. Or we could just not second it, just let her down.
Involuntarily.
We could do that, but I suspect that that's probably not the right thing to do for Corinne.
I'd like to call the motion. Please vote for the motion to accept the resignation of Corinne Chester, Administrative Assistant to Manager Mr. Smith. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. And the motion carries.
I would like to thank Ms. Chester for her graciousness in staying on to the end of August to help with the transition period. The position as what was advertised, and if I get the number correct, Mr. Smith, we had 185 applicants. It's an awful lot of applicants. And we hope that we're in position next week to choose among them and select her, for lack of a better term, replacement. I don't think she'll ever be replaced, but someone who will then assume that position. So we wish her well in her venture. I do have a few announcements, and in keeping with the pace of tonight, I hope to keep them short. Those of you who have not done so, please check the Borough website and participate in the Comprehensive Plan Survey. You'll see on the first page that there's a link to the survey. The Comprehensive Plan is our vision statement for this town. We have received a generous grant to update our current vision statement and hopefully take us for the next 10 years. And this is your opportunity to participate. There's been a series of meetings over the course of the past several months. Many of you have attended, some unfortunately do not have the opportunity. This is a way of participating at your leisure at home. Take a look at mediaborough.com. On the first page, you'll see that there is a link to the survey there. It takes about 5 minutes or so to complete it. I encourage you to do that. The link will remain open until early part of this coming November. Next announcement concerns North Lemon and 4th Streets. Some of you may be aware that there has been a change to a long-standing parking situation at the intersection of North Lemon and 4th Streets. There was a little cutout on the west side of Lemon Street that permitted anywhere from 5, 6, 7 cars to park head-in. About a week or so ago, some boulders were placed in part of that cutout that does not permit head-in parking. It turns out that the majority of that cutout is owned by the borough, but not all of it. And the owner of that small portion has decided that they no longer wish to have resident vehicles parking there. We have looked into ways of trying to help the residents there because it is a difficult parking situation. I mean, I understand that throughout media we all have our parking woes. This is a particularly difficult area. And we'd like to see what we can do to try to help the folks out there. So we have had our code enforcement officer, we have had our engineer, and we've also had our solicitor look at the possibilities there. And we hope that we will have something within the next week or so that we can announce and will provide some parking relief for the residents down there. A little update on something that was mentioned a little bit earlier in Mr. Johnson's report concerning the Wawa application. I apologize. I guess there's good news and bad news. I'll begin with the bad news. The bad news is that my prepared notes are somewhere in my car, which is several blocks away. The good news is that I'll make it short. Many of you have probably heard that this past week, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to this council to approve the preliminary plans for the Wawa development at the intersection of Providence Road and Baltimore Avenue. This is one step in several steps that need to be taken for this project. There is preliminary approval of the land development, which gets followed by final approval of the land development, which is an entirely separate proceeding. And this project also needs zoning relief, so it needs to go before the zoning hearing board as well. And there also is the question of the borough's ownership of a portion of the property on in the proposed Wawa site. So there are quite a few steps that still need to be taken. What the Planning Commission's vote means for us is that we now have, for the first time, this plan before us on a preliminary land development. We take a look at the land development and we decide whether or not it meets with our land development code, and we can make certain recommendations as to the applicant. That I anticipate will come before council this coming September. I've spoken with the architect, Bob Lynn, and Mr. Lynn has told me that given the summer months and the difficulties of rounding up troops in the summer months, and given the complexity of this issue, that he believes that this will come before council in our workshop session in September, which would be September 5. So if you have any interest in the project, you can come for council on September 5 in the large conference room next door and let us know what your feelings are. From that point on, we may have a vote at the end of this coming September in our regular legislative session. It depends upon what happens at our workshop session on September 5. So that will be coming before us sometime looks like in September. I do wish to give a great deal of credit to Mr. Lynn for his work on this project. Those of you who've been following it know that when it first came before this borough, it was a standard wall in a box. It looks very different now, and that's because we put it through the process that's required under law. And there's a reason why our planning commission met on this 5 times. It's a very complicated project with a lot of pieces that are involved. And they thought about this for quite some time, and they asked many questions, and they put the feet to the fire of the applicant to make sure that this project looked better than when it first came in. And it's because of that process that I think that we have a better project right now. And that's, I think, to the good. There's a reason why we have this process. It helps us get things right. So in September, it will come before us, and we'll start looking at it. And then from that point on, the applicant has a number of decisions to make as to when to apply for zoning relief and when to go for final approval, if final approval is in the cards for them. So that's the Wawa project. And let's see, lastly, an update on the 3rd Street project. Those of you who've been down to the 3rd Street Dam lately have probably seen that the water level is considerably lower now than it was in mid-June. That is because the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, of its own volition, not at the request or the suggestion of the borough, has decided that for the safety of the dam, the water in the lake needed to be drained. The more water that is in the lake, the more pressure it puts on the dam, and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection believes that the dam is in an unsafe condition. So I believe on June 14, they came in with a siphon and they lowered the level of the dam. That level should remain, the level of the lake should remain at that level from now on. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection also advised us by letter that it expects to see some steps towards a resolution of the 3rd Street Dam issue by November 1 of this year, whether that's by way of removing the dam or replacing the dam. In their letter, the letter is public information, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection said that if there is no resolution by that time, it may choose to remove the dam. We will see what comes of that. In the meantime, the DEP has strongly recommended that the parties to the 3rd Street Dam issue, which are the Borough Media, the County of Delaware, and Borough Lake Country Club, that they work towards some type of a resolution of the issues that we've been facing for a number of years. I will say that this council has worked towards a compromise solution over the past couple of years, and we came forward with a compromise solution back in September. Unfortunately, one of the parties to the legal proceedings chose not to be satisfied with that and brought us back to court, asking a judge to force us to build a bigger dam than we were inclined to build. The judge did not agree, and the country club, the Borough Country Club, has filed papers with the court to appeal that decision. We are now waiting to see what comes of those papers. The country club is required to file a brief legal papers by 22nd of this month, I believe. We'll have a better sense then of what their thinking is. But we have been working in the spirit of what the DEP has called for, and we as council have communicated to the County of Delaware and Borough Lake Country Club terms on which we believe that this situation can get resolved. Unfortunately, I cannot, at pain of a very piercing stare from Mr. Scott, talk about the substance of that offer. But we have made an offer in an attempt to try to resolve this. We have received some response from the County of Delaware. Again, I cannot talk about the substance of the response, We have not yet received a response from Broomholst Lake Country Club. We're hopeful that we will receive a response in the near future. So that's where things stand with the 3rd Street Dam. Lastly, those of you who attended the Steel Day last Saturday had a wonderful treat. There was the largest replica of the Eiffel Tower in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as I understand, probably on the eastern seaboard. It was a wonderful time. It was a well-organized event by both the Media Business Authority and the Media Arts Council. We applaud their efforts, and we look forward to a similar type effort next year. That concludes my report.
Any other questions for President Hall?
Mr. President, I would ask that this council consider a meeting with our planning commission with regards to the Wawa application prior to our workshop. As we know, our planning commission is simply an advisory board to this council, and I would appreciate the opportunity to question the rationale of their decision at a meeting with the planning commission prior to having a meeting with Wawa, which is the applicant, at our September workshop.
I'm not inclined to do that. I think that our solicitor, our engineer, as well as our code enforcement officer, all of whom were present, or at least they had their nominee present at the Planning Commission meeting this past week, can ably discuss the Planning Commission's decision and the basis for their decision. If anybody on council wishes to talk with anyone who serves in the Planning Commission about their thoughts, they may do so. I do not think that we as council call in the Planning Commission to have them discuss these matters. They have made the decision. Those who were present understand what they were considering and how they considered it. It's now our job to take their decision and the information that we will receive from our professionals as well as from the applicant and make our decision.
I would really disagree on that. I mean, they are an advisory board. I'm asking them to advise us, not for me to read through, scripted minutes of their meetings. You're referencing hours and hours of quote-unquote testimony, and I would think that if they are the advisory board to us, we as the elected officials have every right to ask them to present to us the rationale of their decision and the backup for that decision.
Good points. We disagree on that. Any other questions? All right, then we'll move on to Public Safety, Public Works, Infrastructure, and Fire Committee. Councilman Robbins.
Thank you. Thank you. First and foremost, I do every month with representing the fire company. I'd ask anybody, media or non-media borough resident, to consider volunteering their time with our media fire company, either in as a firefighter, the EMS unit, and or they have an extremely large and very important administrative side of the fire company. So if you aren't inclined to go out and fight fires, but might be good at accounting and things of that nature, I would encourage you to stop by our firehouse and volunteer your time. With that, I will give you the June report for our fire department. There were 45 calls. 20 of those calls represented calls within the borough, and 25 were assisting other fire departments outside of the borough. Even in this hot, nasty weather, our fire company continues to have training sessions, in which during the month of June they had four training sessions. Prior to my legislative agenda, just like to give a little update with regards to public safety. We had a meeting, or have had meetings, and we're in a discussion with regards to expansion of our parking enforcement unit, I guess for lack of better words, enhancing the department to be a little bit larger, possibly one or two people larger in size. We are looking at Kent would be proud that we're actually looking to get into the 21st century and start to use handheld electronic devices for issuing tickets. It makes tracking a lot quicker, a lot easier. It's more professional, also will provide the enforcement division with quick access and communications to our police department. Because believe it or not, there are some people that don't appreciate getting parking tickets and actually will give our enforcement people a hard time once in a while. So that's something that I think is fantastic. It's time that we move to this next generation of electronics and stop handwriting tickets.
Well, if you don't mind me jumping in, could you address the residential enforcement?
I have not yet. But
Okay, good.
you know, part of that is in Brian's been spearheading the discussions with regarding we do have residential parking, and with our limited parking enforcement unit, getting to the residential neighborhoods, we don't get there as often as we would like. This is something that we would be able to enhance. We would also be looking at alternating hours, so we'd have enforcement people out at different hours, different locations, providing, I think, a better enforcement policy and procedure for the borough. We have not done final decisions on how, what, where, and why, but the Public Safety Committee is in the process of doing that. Hopefully by early fall, we'll have this program up and running. With regards to legislative issues, this is kind of a water over the dam, because I have two motions. Both of these situations have already occurred, so basically we are ratifying something that's already happened. So number one on my agenda is I make a motion to ratify the mass gathering permit application for movie night, which July 25th, I apologize, or should that be June 25th?
No, it's July.
July 25th. That's where we have the workshop like that. So the event that will be coming up on July 25th. That's in the form of a motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Not hearing any, I'll call the question. All those in favor of ratifying the mass gathering permit for Cinema Peroni, which is movie night on, I believe it is on South Powell,
Thursday night,
Thursday night.
after dining in the story.
All those in favor of approving the mass gathering permit, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
The motion passes.
And the other one is, was also, this occurred at a workshop meeting. This has been discussed several times. This is regarding a March of Dimes Babies Walk, which will be Sunday, September 29th. This application has been before us for some time, trying to figure out the best way in which to handle it. After many discussions and several conversations with our chief of police, for those media residents that know, we will be just using our traditional parade route. So the walk will start at Edgemont Street, go up State Street to Orange Street north to Front Street, and back down to Edgemont Street. Part of the issue with this is that traditionally this has been held out at Ridley Creek State Park, more of a difficult course to walk, and they traditionally have somewhere on the lines of 400 to 600. In conversation now, with it being in media, a much better location than out in the middle of the woods, giving families an opportunity to be walking on a little bit safer trails, shall I say, and then also a lot of great things to do before and after the event. March of Dimes really isn't short. They're saying now that there could be, 800 or a number of that matter. It will be handled. We handle the Veterans Day Parade every year. I am very excited to say that several volunteers that have worked for years with the Veterans Day Parade are also volunteering their time. These are two individuals that work for our Delaware County Intermediate Unit, and I think Mayor McMahon and Bob Diamond, who is in the audience, will both say that these individuals are varsity players with regards to parades, and I think their assistance will make this go extremely smooth. I think it's going to be a really great event. We're always looking for something new and exciting for events and media, and this is one that will definitely, I hope, will be an annual event starting after this year. So I make a motion to ratify the mass gathering permit for the March of Dimes Babies Walk, Sunday, September 29th. I believe registration will start at 8, the march or the walk will go off around 10, and I'm thinking that will be over no later than 11.
Is there a second? The motion has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no call for discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor of ratifying the mass gathering permit application of the March of Dimes, March for Babies, to be held on Sunday, September 29, 2013, on the route as outlined by Councilman Robinson, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. The motion passes.
And last but not least, as we all know, it's extremely hot weather right now. Please keep in mind of any neighbors, friends that may not have the luxury of air conditioning. Check on them, make sure they're okay. And if there's any issue, what should we do, Bob? Call 911. Call 911. I mean, Bob said everything you could possibly say about 911, but we do joke about it, but it is a serious matter because this borough for years had their own dispatch. We had our own private number for our residents to call for police emergencies. That is no longer there, and I know many residents that sometimes aren't sure if whatever the issue is important enough to call 911. It is the only way for us to now get a hold of our police department and or to notify for fire, and I strongly encourage you, anytime, anything, please call 911. It's very important to her that you notify our police. They will be there immediately. We're should be all very proud that we have the most professional department, I think, in all of Delaware County. Have platoons out there of 3 officers at a time, and I'm pretty confident that they will be at your house, in seconds, maybe minutes at the most. So any issues, please call 911. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions for Councilman Robinson?
Just a quick observation when we're talking about residential parking, which I don't use it. I have off-street parking, so I don't use the residential spaces on my street, but I actually am catching myself feeling sorry for the folks who are getting tickets there because the residential R's painted on the spaces, you literally can't see them anymore. And I know that in this weather you can't paint and all that kind of stuff, but I think that would help if, we mark things pretty clearly here. Public Works does a great job. But I do see, I kind of watch people getting confused, because the sign is there, but the R's you can't see anymore. And I know that obviously the personnel issue, for people on foot, it's a big borough to cover. As small as we feel like we are, it's a lot of ground for folks to have to cover. So it's just one thing that's actually I've been noticing frequently, and if that could...
I will notify
It's
Highway.
not, yeah.
There are several areas in which we plan on painting our roads. There's been discussion with regards to stop signs instead of having more signs that we don't look at in the air. We're talking about having stop reflected on the street surface itself. Usually this time of year, when it's not quite this hot, our highway crew is out there starting to repaint parking lines, X's and things of that nature. I'll make sure that...
Oh, they do such a good job. I just, for as much as I know that my neighbors use those, there are only 3 spaces, but on Plum and Orange, on 3rd where I am, it's really tight if you don't have off-street parking. So obviously I want my neighbors to be able to park there, and I want them to always be available to them, but I also am starting to feel kind of bad for folks who are just innocently trying to get to the courthouse.
We'll get those R's repainted. Thank you for letting me know.
Are there any other questions for Councilman Robinson? Not hearing any. Before we get to our bookend public comment and privilege of the floor, just a brief announcement, whether for good or for ill, I will not be here next August. I will be away, so Councilwoman Simpson will be handling the gala, so everyone behave. All right, so public comment and privilege of the floor. This is your second opportunity to come forward and speak in public. I know that that's a great desire of many. Does anyone wish to come forward and address council at this time?
Mike York, 303 South Avenue. You were discussing an R painted somehow to designate residential parking. My whole street is residential parking. I've never seen an R. I don't know what you're talking about. And I always have other people parking there that are non-residents. I was just wondering, what is this symbol you're talking about?
It's just on my particular block, and Councilman Robinson is the chair of that committee, so he can talk about it more deeply. But on my particular block on West 3rd between Jackson and Olive, there are 3 spots that are designated for residential, so it's open parking for everybody else. There's no meters, there's no nothing. But the 3 spots that are reserved for residents have an R on them, just to distinguish them. If your whole street's residential,
On the street.
yeah, on the actual
Your
pavement.
entire street is residential, it wouldn't reflect that.
Right.
So where Dawn lives, I'm just gonna say there's 15 parking spots. Out of those 15, 3 are dedicated just to
I see.
residential. So on those 3, there would be an R reflected
Okay.
on the ground. But in your area, I believe, Jeff always knows everything, the entire street is residential, so it would be just reflected by signs. And
Okay.
again, if you feel that there are people parking there without proper permits, you can either, call 911, go to the police, or with something that you really could contact Borough Hall.
We have from time
Okay.
to time, and it has been responsive.
And you have to do it, because you know better than anybody, you
Every
live
day is a
there.
new
People
situation.
keep doing it.
Plus, we have the church, and there's always something. But I would also like to add that I support Ms. Rowe in being concerned in this extreme weather about the safety of, acutely perishable food, especially fish. I mean, it goes pretty quickly. And my dad said, nobody sells bad fish. So, I think we got to be especially careful with that.
I agree, and it was no disrespect, it was just being kind of like.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
it just,
And
that's
they
one
do
thing I
have
always ask.
everything iced, and the reason that the aroma was so enticing is because they were taking the cold product and cooking it as the person is standing there to take with.
I'm sure that's the way it was, but it's just something to be extra concerned about.
Yes, our health inspectors there, and the managers of the market are there on site, and so they follow the directives to the T.
Good to hear. Thank you very much.
Guarantee Monica will let us know tomorrow if there was any issues with this.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
know by
York.
now.
Does anyone else wish to address council at this time? Seeing no other takers, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks. And good night.
That was just.